Hi, this is Milo for bestpokercoaching.com, and in today's video we'll talk about post-flop play in 4-betted pots. Now, when do you get to a pot on the flop in a 4-betted pot? Normally after a failed 4-bet bluff, or if you called his 4-bet because you had the odds to call. Now, let's look at the first situation. An example, our villain makes it 80 and he 3-bets quite a lot, and for some reason, maybe I just wanted to try it out, I made a 4-bet bluff. I don't have the possibility to call because his 3-bet is 19, and as you will see in later videos, you can't really call here. You should normally fold, but I decided to 4-bet to 170, maybe 180, 190 was probably a little bit better because it looks a little bit stronger if you make it at least 10 big blinds. Anyway, he calls. Then we get to a flop. Now this is a flop where I would normally make a continuation bet regardless of my hand. So I would normally make it like half a pot size bet, like about 170, something like that, because it's so dry, and it would have pushed many good hands before the flop. Anyway, he checks to us, we make 130. It's kind of low, but like I said, the board is somewhat dry, and because we already put in a large portion of our stack, we actually don't need to make it so big. Normally in unraised pots or 2-betted pots or something like that, or 3-bet pots, you need to think more about implied odds, but here, because we already put so much in, the implied odds are smaller. I would say 150, 170 is still good here. He pushes. So now my point is, what I was going to make is the following. Realize you're committed with most pairs and draws in flop play in 4-betted pots. Like in 4-betted pots in the flop, you normally have about 1 to 1.5 pot sizes behind, so you only need about 33 to 38% equity on the flop. So if you go back to the hand and see if that's about right. So how much did he put in? Well, it is like, how much is it for us to call? It is about 850 for us to call. So let's make a quick calculation. The total, it's about 1200. So the total pot will be about 2400. So because the effective stacks are 1200, and it's about 850 for us to call. So divide it by 2400, and we need about 35% equity to call. So I'll show that in a calculation now. That so we call, yeah, I'll show it in a calculation that we actually have that. I gave him a range here in equity lab. All those dark blue hands mean that they're all suited, so I only gave the suited hands for that, and of course they're suited in diamonds. Then all the light blue hands, they're generally off-suited. So I mean, for example, I didn't put like aces to jacks or tens in his hand because I thought he would 5-bet that pre-flop anyway, would probably push it in. Actually ace king as well, so I could actually take that away, probably ace queen too. So let's go to his range, and we have ace 3 offsuited, and the board, I put a board in here. So then we evaluate, and you see we have about 42-41% equity against this range. Now we call. It's quite simple. I mean, point is, what I'm trying to make is that with most pairs in a 4-betted pot, you're actually committed very easily, especially if you wouldn't have made it a little bit bigger like I should have. I probably should have made it like 190 or around 200 or so, and we are a little bit deep as well, so normally you would play with like 100 big blinds or less if the guy is a little short, if you made some money from him. So then you're even more committed. So to go back to the PowerPoint sheet, we need about 33 to 38% equity. So as you know, any flush draw, open and straight draws, they're usually more than good enough to go all in with. Then many pairs as well, especially on drawy flops, because on a drawy flop you face a push from the other guy, then you can put the draws in his range as well. And on a dry flop, low pair or medium pair, you might consider folding it. And of course we never fold our top pair in our 4-betted pot. For example here, this is 3-6, he makes it 3 bigs. We 3-bet him, probably, well, his fold to 3-bet is 65. And we probably 3-bet him a little bit too much because he decides to 4-bet with 7s. And how much is it for us to call? He's very nitty, as you can see, so you would think he has a very strong range based on his statistics. Like his 4-bet is 2%. All his other stats indicate he's very nitty as well. So how much is it for us to call? It's about 70 to call, 72, so that's exactly 12 big blinds, 3-6. So we call because we just have such a good odds. And then we check and hope he, like his continuation bet on the flop is 100 in reverse pots. So of course we check. He makes it half a pot size bet, and then well, we push because we want to represent the draw, or we don't want to give him free cards, and he's committed with so many hands anyway. So he called. Pretty standard. Just what I'm trying to say is that even nitty guys can have like weird hands. So I'm never folding top pair in a 4-betted pot. About 4-betted pots, there's a trick on drawing non-ace high boards. You can usually bluff the turn if they check on the flop. So whether they check behind on the flop or whether they check towards you on the flop and then check towards you on the turn again, then I would bluff a lot on drawy flops. Like for example, these flops are very good to bluff on the turn. The reason for that is that people don't slow play that much on these flops, and they don't tend to slow play in 4-betted pots either. They do pot control quite a lot in 4-betted pots. For example, people who have kings or queens and then an ace comes on the flop, then they start checking and check calling for very often, or checking. Or they have top pair like an ace with a low kicker, and they don't want to overplay their hand, so they start checking as well. However, on these flops, if people have a draw, they will usually bet it either on the flop or the turn. And if they don't have anything, they're usually just giving up. It's because 4-betted pots are kind of awkward. Like I said, you have to put in a lot of money if you want to bluff, and you're kind of committed with many hands. People just don't want to play, and if they 4-bet it as a bluff pre-flop, they often give up on the flop. So we can exploit that. So here's an example of where I do that. We 4-bet bluff the guy for whatever reason. Jack 9 of suited is a decent hand to 4-bet bluff this guy with and try out if he folds. Well, he doesn't. So now we get to a flop. It is really drawy, so he could also have like 7s, 9s even. I don't really expect him to raise that. I expect him to actually call that and play it like this. So we just check behind, and now the queen comes up and he checks again, and this for me is a clear signal that we should bluff here. I mean, maybe he will fold his ace high or something, or maybe pocket deuces or whatever. I make it quite big. Maybe I could have made it 300 as well. The thing is, he's never slow playing any hand here, so it's pretty clear he's giving up. I see a lot of people here though, they keep checking behind as well, because they're like, oh, my 4-bet bluff failed, my Jack 9 of suited is nothing now, and I don't even have a pair, so why should I bluff? He called my 4-bet. Well, and then you end up losing the pot on showdown, check through the hand, and then you lose it against ace high or against deuces. And here on the turn, it's a very, very profitable bluff. So if this would be an ace, I would be much less inclined to make this bluff, or if there would be an ace on the flop, because then it's very likely that he hit an ace and he's actually checking it towards us because he hopes that we are like bluffing it, and that he does some kind of pot control in a way. For example, if he had like, if this 8 would have been an ace and he had like an ace with a low kicker, he would probably check it towards us as well. But now I'm pretty confident, especially on his after his turn check, that his hand is really weak and that he's just giving up. Because even a hand like sevens or something has a difficult time calling here, especially because the queen is there, so we could represent hitting the queen.